summarize this, and then I want to expand on it for the audience. So the four elements, just remind the audience of the fourth industrial revolution. We're talking about IoT, extended reality, AI, and forgetting the fourth.
And the evolution of cloud, right?
Cloud
I'll give you one little example, right? Federated AI, which was invented, I don't know, about 2016, 2017. So now instead of sending AI to this giant blob in the sky and running all of this data and there's actually an architecture that lets me put AI at the edge and run it in a federated model, which if you think about healthcare, that happens at the edge, and I need to be really careful about where I send the data for regulatory security reasons. Boy, that's a pretty interesting thing for that to be able to run at the edge. And then the other thing that's happening is we're getting closer and closer to real-time capabilities with AI, whether that's chips in a drone or really smart platforms like Avantic that can do real-time event processing. Because the real world, most of it happens in real time, right? That's where that works. Now, the ironic trick about real time, we just did some work with one of the companies I'm on the board of, with Mayo Clinic, and we saw patterns for neonatal patients, little premature babies, and it's nice to get the pattern that says something's really bad happening, code blue, everybody rush and go save this baby. What you really want from real-time data is, here's the pattern that comes before that pattern. Next Wednesday, you're going to have trouble with this baby, so let's go do stuff now, right? So that real-time is kind of this ironic thing that lets you get ahead of what's about to happen. Now, for like cars crashing and things like that, you want real-time in real-time. But it'd be really good to see the patterns a little bit ahead, whether that's, programmatic maintenance and preventative maintenance of things, or it's not letting your logistics system get clogged up, or it's making sure your customers are flowing. I mean, silly things like we did an experiment with a big retailer where we put real-time cameras in their parking lot, and we could tell them 20 minutes in advance of queues showing up at checkout that you're going to need to add a couple of people, because if we look at the car count, this is the time frame. And so 10 minutes before they had a jam, they'd open a couple more lanes, and now you're no longer have this experience of, and it's no more labor, it's just the right planning and the right information. So now you have this better experience for customers inside the same cost structure. So that sort of seeing patterns ahead of the future and fixing the future is going to be a big deal.
So let me put something in front of you, and I like to critique it and see if I'm going in the right direction, or maybe I'm not looking at this the right way. If I go outside in the town center and I start asking random people their thoughts and feelings, because at the end of the day we are sentient beings and we get driven by the way we feel, probably much more than we should, versus the way we think, right? What their thoughts are on this concept of the fourth industrial revolution, and I start mentioning AI, XR, cloud, IoT. It has been my experience that the average person has a sense of fear because they feel like they're going to become obsolete. And if we go look back in history at every one of these points where disruptions happens, where disruptive companies or disruptive individuals come into the picture to do new things, pretty much everything in the ecosystem starts changing, and the ones who don't change, they get left behind, right? So companies have seen dramatic change over the decades, from the little things like TQM to how do they improve cybersecurity, right? So we see this process where certain jobs go away and new jobs arise. However, today there's something that seems to not be changing as quickly, and that's how these big companies get funded and how they operate their day-to-day. And there's this model of well, what's going to happen in next quarter? And what's the next quarter? And what's the next quarter? And every quarter has to bring growth. Because if you don't bring growth quarter to quarter to quarter, then the street doesn't like you, you know, and stock gets impacted and so forth. And in my mind, I'm thinking, is that the right model for innovation? Because the only thing that I know that grows quarter to quarter forever is cancer, right? I mean, how much growth? At some point you've taken over all your competition and you're left alone, right? And then what do? Right? So I've had these conversations randomly with people. I said, okay, you have the big corporations. They're trying to reinvent themselves. They're trying to do, but they really can't make that much change because they're too big, right? And innovation tends to come better in smaller, more nimble, moving parts. Those companies are really good at implementing things at a large scale. And with all these elements that you're talking about now, it seems that there is no other way but to really change the way that we as individuals perceive how we need to be prepared to be a part of this new revolution and how some of the larger companies around the world need to see themselves. Am I off base here?
No, no. So there's four or five things in there, and uh, I think when you talk to the person in the street or even the average board member, there's a fear born of big scary terms, industrial revolution. We've all read Charles Dickens. We know there's some really good and bad things in there, and I mean, what's the Tale of Two Cities? The very first line is, "It's the best of times, it's the worst of times," right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's fear, and I think a lot of that comes from not understanding the underlying stuff, that what is really happening functionally. And it doesn't mean that when you actually do understand the underlying stuff, you're not more worried, but it's just that, well, I don't know what that is, so it's mysterious and uh, um, mysterious and strange. When I was 4 years old, my mother's father told my dad, "Hey, you shouldn't play with technology you don't understand in the backyard." My dad was using a wheelbarrow. It was his little joke, right? But playing and being surrounded by technology you don't understand is really, really difficult. So I spend a lot of time with people kind of going, look, in fact, all of my uni lectures are, here's the de-buzzword, demystified explanation of all this AI stuff, right? This is what it does and how it works. Here's what the XR stuff is. Here's where cloud is going and why that makes sense. And then you kind of put all of that together. But the scary part is, wow, that stuff can have a real impact, right? It can change the way we compete. And then the other scary part with some of the smarter people is exactly what you said, is that big companies have really strong pressures for short-term numbers. And going up to the board or having a board discussion about, we need to radically change and we really need to step on the gas, when you've got 20 quarters of, we've been doing pretty well, this has been working really well, and we've got some really great leaders that we love, strapping on that change and that strategy shift is not in their nature, right? Especially if you look at what some of the folks are incented for. I talked to a CEO of a very big company right as this stuff was coming along, around about 20, I think it was 2022, 2021, about being head of innovation and transforming the company. And the conversation ended with, yeah, you know what? I've only got 2 years left on my contract. So I'm just going to, literally, he said, I love what we've been talking about. And we'd had like 15 meetings. But I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm going to make it out of here, right? Because here's my bonus package. And I'm like, all right, I get it. That's the real world. The really hard human thing to do is when you dig into this and you understand it and you go, okay, we've got a strategy change moment and we're going to need to, do a tweak on our strategy. Not blow the whole strategy up, but you've got to think about what you would do with this. That often includes getting rid of people who have been really good performers, right? In the mid 2000s, genius Ed Zander, who used to run Sun, came over and took over Motorola, and we changed the company in 18 months from internally focused, incremental, genius engineering. We just keep plodding along, and we're fantastic at the R&D stuff. To no, we're a consumer-based company. We're going to be a cool brand. We're going to move really fast. We're going to innovate. And we're going to structure the company in the right shape to support that, which is a matrix sharing of the smarts, collaborative organization structure, as opposed to the other one runs on a general patent command and control structure. And so I had to go to a guy that ran all of the e-commerce, who'd had fantastic performance, and go, Bob, you can't work here anymore. And he goes, well, I've been a top 5% performer for a decade. What do you mean I can't work anymore? Well, you're really good at general patent organization, command and control. You tell your folks to take a hill, and they take the hill, and it's great. We're changing that to a global matrix network with a marketing specialist here, an IT specialist there, and everybody sharing pooled resources, sharing knowledge. And he goes, well, I hate that model. I can't work in that model. I've never done that model. And I go, yeah, that's why you can't work here. But I'm a top 5% performer for the last 10 years. And then HR finds out you're getting rid of a top 5% performer, and that turns into this big rigmarole. But we did some really good things with Bob, and we helped him go and move, and Bob created his own consulting agency for people that wanted that old model, and Bob got his own plane. So Bob did really well. But nobody in the company wants to go to the Bob and go, you've been great, you gotta go, right? But the game changes from tennis to rugby. You need to get some rugby players on the field. So it's not only against the incentives of most companies and their natural change pattern and the human's general aversion to change. It's on a human level, it's a really difficult thing to do. But here's the scary part, right? If you look back in history around innovations, whether it's IT centric innovations, manufacturing, or logistics models, or even weapons platforms, right? There's a long history of two things happening. One, people look at the wave one of innovations that were built with this new cool stuff and go, wow, that's really something. But it's now 3 or 4 or 5 years in the future, and we've got even better technology. So if I built that thing today, what would I do differently, and how would I leverage these new weapons, this new technology? And they come up with a different model that is, better and cheaper cost structure. A great example of this is Workday, right? Workday is literally the same two guys that founded PeopleSoft. 10 years after they sold it to Oracle for $1 bazillion, and their non-compete is over, and technology has moved forward. They go, look, we could use in-memory processing, big data so far ahead. The web is a much more sophisticated place now. There's XR coming. How would we build this from scratch, knowing what we know now about what we did then and leverage new technology? I mean, they didn't kill PeopleSoft, but they got $50 billion of market cap, right? So that's a scary thing for incumbents who are worried about, I can't tell Bob the difficult story. I can't go to the board and go, we're going to go through turmoil. We need a strategy refresh moment, because that happens a lot. Wave 2 kills Wave 1, and that's happened over and over again. And then the second thing that happens a lot is industry outsiders think of a new model, right? Sears, back in the early days of railroads and telegraph is a great model of that. Rockefeller changed the model of how you get oil out of the ground and turn it into something useful, created Standard Oil, and he was so successful, we created monopoly legislation because he got too big, right? There are lots of examples of that, new people coming on with the new model that drives that. Amazon is a great example. FedEx, when FedEx started, wait, you're going to fly planes into a central place and then back out? Well, that's just stupid. Why would that ever work, right? Changed logistics, changed supply chain. The whole world of business logistics processing where experts come to your company and go, we're going to fix your supply chain. One of my mentors, who's in a picture right there, invented that. And we would knock on the door of companies and go, look, we're just way better at this than you are. And here's where you've had problems and where you've given us a ton of money that you shouldn't have given us because you needed emergency shipments. Here's how we're going to help you through peak season. And after a while, when I was in Asia, we did Intel, Apple, Gap, Siliconics, did their supply chains. They gave us a lot more money, but they saved a ton of money because their supply chains ran better. So it's those outsiders. We didn't really know as much about how Apple works as Apple does. We just knew more about supply chain. So, excuse me. So there's going to be a lot of those sort of things. That's typically what happens, right? New incumbents. Just to add a little bit more scariness to this, startups used to hit a barrier when they got to a certain size, right? That it's either manufacturing and servicing a product became very difficult. How do I scale that? Or logistics. How do I go from 10,000 units to 1 million units? I don't know how to do that. That's really hard. And you have to build that out slowly. Labor, especially tech talent, really hard to do. Today I can go to Prologis and say, hey, I got this business. This year we're going to do 5,000 units, but next year I think we're going to do 500,000, and they won't even bat an eyelid. They'll go, yeah, sure, we can handle that. Not a problem. There's a bunch of outsourced manufacturing, Vietnam, India, China, Mexico, that I can go to and go, 5,000 units this year, 500,000 next year. Yeah, no problem. We will take care of it. And then I can hire talent and fractional talent from lots of different places, really, really easy through platforms, right? So, the company that might be the game changer might really only have about 12 employees, and the rest of it is this agglomeration of things that no longer has a serious barrier to growth. So it's a very, very difficult competitive time. Now, the good news is big enterprises are really not great at fast change. So competition is not going to be as fierce as it might be. But I guarantee you, from here to 8 years, there's a bunch of companies that are mortally wounded because they missed this shift. The other thing is there are going to be sectors of labor where labor goes away, right? I wrote an article, put it in LinkedIn about a week ago on software development. Software development a couple of years from now is going to be 60% easier, more effective. So if I was going to hire 300 software developers next year, or give an Indian outsourcer another 300 jobs, I'm now only doing 120. And if I'm scaling and I'm not growing at that rate, maybe I get rid of some, right? Klarna, the buy now, pay later thing out of Sweden, just dropped Gen AI into their call centers and improved customer satisfaction and eliminated 700 jobs, right? So you start to multiply that out, and that becomes a very tricky thing.